Peace and bless. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is Umoja, Sunday, September the 24th, 2023. And we have a very special guest with us, Brother Sekou Kelleh. And this is, I believe, his second time being featured on the show, but he's been on the program multiple times in our open forums. So many of you may already be familiar with him. And we're going to talk about his recent debate with Brother Ankh of the Pseudo Killers on the issue of science versus African spirituality and which one should Black people adopt. And so this is going to be an informative conversation. And at some point, I'm just going to let him take over the show. So y'all sit back, relax. We'll be back in just a moment. Peace and blessings, and we are back. And excuse the noise if you hear it in the background. I decided to step into this cafe part of a grocery store on my way out to Western Pennsylvania today, and stop here for some meetings and whatnot and get my study on before I head out. And of course, to bring you this good information. So I'll try to keep my microphone muted when I am not speaking. And of course, I want to shout out everyone who is listening live on X as well as on Facebook. And it feels weird saying X because it just doesn't have the same potency as Twitter. But that's neither here nor there. So shout out to Rich, the African Elder, who is in the building. Sister Mika is in the building, Brother Light. Brother Teti Ursaneperu is in the building. Infinite Minds is in the place to be. Dasharab is in the place to be. AC1 is in the place to be. And love and light to our good brother Shakara all the way out in the UK. And I'm sure a few more will make themselves known as the time goes by. And so speaking of Brother Shakara, I just want to start off with the announcement. So I will start off with this announcement first.
Kush TV presents Sankofa, The Future of Black History, a unique Black History Month online series exploring all dimensions of time as we chronicle the Black past, command the Black present, and empower the Black future. Workshops include The Future is Black, Why is Black History Under Attack? With Shakara, We Create Value, The Ingenuity of Enslaved Africans, with Robin Walker, Ancestral Calling, Agriculture, and the Opobo Library Initiative with Aya Eleli. Quantum Field Theory as African Heritage with asarimhotep. For full information including dates and registration, visit GotKushTV.com. We have made history. We are making history. There is history still to be made. Sankofa, The Future of Black History. A Black History Love series not to be missed.
That is right. Make sure that you get your tickets at gotkushtv.com. There are 4 separate conversations, each on a Wednesday night. So for those of you who are, in the United States, the times will start on the East Coast. Will be 2 p.m. for each one of the conversations and presentations. And so you got to go to gotkushtv.com to get your tickets. And as discussed in the video, I will be speaking on quantum field theory as African heritage. And speaking of conferences, y'all know that I often speak at the Sheikh Anta Diop conference. And this year, I will be there as well. And the title of my presentation is going to be Osiris in the form of Sheikh Anta Diop. What does it mean to be king? And so I'm going to be dealing with, of course, the etymology of Osir or Osiris. And then I'm going to show how that etymology rightfully pertains to the late Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop and why he's called the Osiris, of Africana studies. So, so there's that. And then, of course, if you haven't gotten your copy of this particular text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, Towards an Etymology of a Place Named Kemet, I highly recommend that you do so. And you can get your copy from asarimhotep.com. And I usually do this a lot on like my Facebook and Instagram. And it's whatever books that I'm reading that day for whatever reason, I kind of give a shout out to that book. So today's reading is Mathematical Methods in Linguistics. These 3 authors that you can see right here. And, for those of us who are into computer science, we have to study linguistics so that, when we're developing large language models, we can put it in its proper and right context so that the stuff works. So you got to understand human languages as an informal language, and so that you can translate much of what is human language into what we call formal languages, that is code, mathematics, logic, and the like. So so for those of you who are computer science and interested in learning about large language models, we're going to have to, of course, get into discrete math and graph theory and the like, and of course language and linguistics. Otherwise, you couldn't have Google Translate, for example. And with that said, I think that's, all the announcements for right now. So, let me see. There we go. So without further ado, I'm going to add our good brother, Sekou Kelleh, in the building. And how art thou, good brother?
Peace, and blessings. Asar, I'm happy to be here, and hope everybody is having a wonderful Sunday.
Already. Before we get started, just want to shout out a few more people. Learn Together with Obama is in the building. And please forgive me if I mispronounce this, but I'm going to say Jmo X building. And then Spin Barrel is in the building. And I think I saw AC1 already. If I didn't, I apologize. But AC1 is in the building. It says, reading your race and identity in ancient Egypt. Methodology used is flawless. It will be hard to debunk. I try to make it that way. And thank you again for your support and for reading the text. And our good brother Zoo 221 is in the building. So Hotep, love and light. And lastly, Bwana Aguziki. Shout out good brothers on the panel, indeed. And shout out to you as well. And Dr. Rob says, nice shirt, saying sorry, but Kemet remains pitch black, if you say so. Indeed. So, Brother Sekou. So, we introduced you the last show, to the Mbongi in a more formal manner. And so I highly recommend that everybody go and visit that program that we had him on. And so now you're back and you got some additional information for us. And, this is in regards to the particular topic that you and Brother debated in terms of African spirituality versus science. So I want to know quickly, how did this conversation even come about, and how was that title decided?
Right. Thank you very much, Asar. Thank you for bringing me on your show. It's always a pleasure for me to be on this show. Every time I come here, the interaction is good. I learn a lot from the audience, from the comments, and I'm so happy to be here today to discuss this topic. How this discussion, the debate I had with Ankh on last week, I had a debate with Ankh on spirituality versus science. So it was sometime in August, I got a call from Sarnetta. So Sarnetta said, would you like to debate Ankh? So I said, debate him on what? He said, on the two credo theory of Sheikh Anta Diop. I said, yeah, of course. I believe that theory still stands in terms of as far as sociology is concerned, and I can defend it. And he said, okay, another topic will be science versus spirituality. And I said, what? I am not against science. So how can it be science versus spirituality? But Ankh was on the call, by the way. So Sarnetta said, well, Ankh, you see, I told you Sekou is not anti-science. So I said, how can an African who practices spirituality be anti-science? It doesn't even add up. So I said, I can be. So Ankh said, well, you can be, but you practice spirituality. I said, of course, I'm an African, and that's part of my cultural heritage. And he said, well, it's not going to help us. It's not going to take our people forward. It's a relics of our past that need to be forgotten, and we will focus on scientific realism and all of that. So I said, well, that's a materialistic approach to life. It's a materialistic philosophy that you are trying to push, which I think the African approach to reality, when we examine it, we will conclude then that science is very important and the spirituality is also very important in making progress, what we call human progress. If the holistic progress of people, which include the politics, which includes their culture, economics, and every other progress that you want, even psychology, and even how to treat people in terms of morality, ethics. If you put all of these things together that constitute human development, I think you will come to a conclusion that spirituality should also coexist with science in the development of a Black personality today in the world. It will not lead to regression. I think it will lead to progress. And he was against that very idea. So I said, then let's go for the debate. So that's how the conversation started.
All right. I was just showing the flyer from the debate.
Yeah, during my, I will explain that in a very, yes.
Yeah, so it happened on September the 15th. And
it's September 15th.
And so we're getting we're going to get some of the slides that he presented, in the conversation. So, we're all familiar with Brother Ankh very well. And, from the look at just the title and stuff itself, I immediately said that Ankh is going to lose. And it's because, Ankh really doesn't have a grasp of science and its limitations. So anybody who deals with science would know that, science is very narrow and very specific, in terms of, and like science isn't a thing. It's like the science of something. So like if you're talking about the science of astrophysics, they're talking about astrological bodies, you know, until you get to, like, of course, quantum physics. Then you're dealing with the subatomic world. Like, each field deals with a different thing. So, like, if you're talking about biology, that's, you know, the science of living things, you know, on Earth, right? And then, of course, you have the science of chemistry, you know, how, you know, atoms interact and molecules create, you know, chemical substances, and, you know, their interactions and probable usages, you know, in human life and just in Earth and in general, right? So the science is never used to try to answer spiritual questions. So it could never be a versus, right? Like you wouldn't, like, if somebody was to ask you to give an assessment of, you know, Dizzy Gillespie's, you know, horn playing, right? So from the get, we know that we're dealing with music, and then somebody starts talking about, you know, changing the oil in the transmission, you know, and these are the parts that you use. Like, these are two totally different, you know, things. So the information and the knowledge that I would use to fix the car is not going to give me any kind of depth on how Dizzy Gillespie plays, you know. And so I just knew by the way that the questions was structured that Uncle's going to lose. And then on top of that, that he's more so a scientific enthusiast, more so than you know, promoting scientific literacy. Because for you to promote scientific literacy, you would have to teach people how to read scientific journals, and you would have to have knowledge within that particular field to be able to teach people how to read that. And you would have to be very, very strong with math. So I put him more so as a science advocate, and, you know, just like somebody who would advocate reading, but not necessarily what to read, you know, per se. Just the act of reading itself, you know, has its own benefits.
Right.
So,
I did tell him that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I did tell him that. Yeah, I did tell him. I said, I believe you are a science enthusiast, but you are not teaching scientific literacy. Other than that, I should be seeing you teaching us calculus, math, and teaching us chemistry, physics. Or even if you are interested in history, for example, you'll be telling us, like the debate out there, how were the pyramid built? Were they built by molding blocks, or were built by stones cutting with those primitive tools? And you will be giving us theory, and you will have been proving things. And you know, into economics, you will have been telling us how things were, giving us figures. But that's teaching people how to read scientific information, teaching people how to analyze scientific data. But what you do is that you just a science enthusiast. Science is better than this. Science is better than that. Science is undefeated. So you will be less useful to scientific community. I think you will be good for a general discussion on the streets on science. Well, scientific community will have less use for you, and I say that respectfully. You know.
Indeed. And the second problem is, and this is just with experience with our good brother, and personal as well as public conversations, and that is you know, he's what he titles himself as a black atheist, and we've told him many times that that's only logical within the context of the Abrahamic religion, right? Because they believe in an entity that they define as a god that is separate from what they consider creation itself. Like, these themes and paradigms don't exist in the vast majority of African wisdom traditions. So you would have to adjust your argument for different cultures, and that's something that he doesn't want to do. He wants to blanket everybody. So like when I tell him that, you know, God is existence itself, is everything and all things, you can't turn around and say that God doesn't exist, because the very existence itself is defined as God in a number of these traditions. So it's just he suffers from, you know, arguments that are not well formed. Um, so you know, that's why you really can't have a debate. You would have to have a different type of debate. But the opportunity is, you know, for those, because I know they changed the time for y'all. Well, I don't know how the time limits and stuff were kind of divvied out. Unfortunately, I had to work during the time of our presentation. So you have kind of free reign here. So I'll let you, you know, when you're ready, share your slides.
Yeah, just before I share my slides, I just want to show some books that I bought during the course of this debate, you know, just to introduce it to the audience. So in case some of them because during the slide, you might not pay attention to those books. So maybe if you have your own time, you can go read or buy these books and also look at them. So I have, first, if I'm saying that, also I have to thank all those who helped me, you know, during this debate. Shakara, you know, some PDF materials I received, and also from asarimhotep and other people who have actually contributed to me putting my research together. So I want to thank all of you. And these are some books that you might find very interesting that I bought, you know, purposely for this debate. There are other e-books that I won't be able to show you physically, but you'll see them in the slide. So this is Mbok Bakson. He wrote a book, African Religion, from Quantum Cosmology to the Symbolism of God. So this book is very important. We have it in French and English. This is the English version. And if you read this book, it will tell you a lot about African God. I don't know why I keep going off and on, whether it's my internet. My internet is stable. So this is the book. We also have here Of Water and Spirit by Malidoma Patrice Some. So this book talks about initiation. A man from Burkina Faso who got initiated, and how he went from being kidnapped by Christian missionaries, and he learned Christian theology, and coming back to his village and have to be reinitiated into his traditions, what he went through, how that shifted his psychology, and how he actually tried to see the difference between how his people view reality and how the Christian doctrine that he learned, how that also played differently from African spirituality. I bought this book as well. Dalai Lama, The Universe is a Single Atom. A very, very good book. This book is written not by an African, of course. Dalai Lama is the leader of the people of Tibet and the Buddhist, one of the most famous Buddhist monk in the world. It's interesting to me because this book, he tried to speak on science and his tradition, his spiritual tradition, Buddhism. And if you read the book, it's really important because for Black people who want to call themselves atheists, for example, how they think that they have to operate within the Western philosophy and dichotomy is either you are theist, you believe in a God, or you don't believe in a God. There are two boxes and you must enter one of these boxes. If you say, no, I don't belong to any of these boxes, then you don't make sense because that's how Europeans see reality. So what Dalai Lama explains here, they don't believe, the part of Buddhism that he comes from, they don't believe in a deity. There's no concept of deity in this Tibet Buddhism, but they are not atheists either. For them, the universe has neither beginning nor end. It has no cause, and it has no reason, and everything is empty, and everything is everything. They call it Sonyata in their concept. Now, it's interesting to know this, that Black people think if they don't have to believe in their culture, then therefore they must be atheist. Here are Asian people is even they have a philosophy that has no God in it, yet they do not declare themselves atheists. You don't have to be a proxy in order for you to make sense in this world. That's very important for you to know. And I got this other book. It's called Quantum Entanglement: The Laws of Reality by Thomas Marcella, a professor of astrophysics. This book is very, very interesting to me. It's based on the debate between Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr in the 1930s. They were arguing on quantum entanglement, how that play out in terms of the nature of reality, because relativity tells us what reality is. There's a lot of noise in the background. So, yeah, it's okay. So, quantum entanglement, how the theory of relativity, how it actually try to show how the macro universe work. That is things we see, the planet, the stars, how the macro universe operate. Nothing travel faster than the speed of light, and everything boils down to local realism. That I can be in Canada and physically interfere with somebody in America that will violate local realism, and all these things we are considered scientific fact. But in the quantum mechanics of Niels Bohr, he argued that the quantum universe, which is the micro universe, violate every theory in relativity, so that two pairs of quantum material are entangled, even they are distance of billions of light years, they still interact with each other, and that violate local realism. And all that play to explain that the reality, the way we see it objectively, might just be a summary of the totality of reality. And this is interesting to know, because we think the way we look at the physical universe, really, that's how the universe really is. It might just be a summary of the reality that we are looking at, that the observer effect is very, very crucial into what we understand as reality. So the book is important. So I use other classical work that we all know. Yeah.
Quickly, I'll just to let folks know that I'll be dealing with that very subject in the quantum field theory as African heritage discussion on, I believe it's October the 24th for the Got Kush TV. So I'll show you those very ideas and discussions within traditional African wisdom traditions. So keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I use classical material that we all already know about. Destruction of Black civilization is important. I use Mariba Ani Yurugu, while explain the Western mode of thought and how it's different from the African way of thought. It's very important to look at this book. The Libation by Kimani Nahusi, very important book. I got a quote here from that is very crucial, important to how African spirituality helped build some of the early institutions after slavery, and that then changed into churches. You find a quote here from W.E. Du Bois. He wrote this man quoted Du Bois here, and I use some of the quote. So very quickly, I'll be done. I use African philosophy by Theophilo Benga. It's a very important book. And I also used Ndaba My Children by our great elder Credo Mutua. And of course, Medu Neta Volume 1 by Ra Unnefar Amen was very important in explaining some esoteric understanding of Africa. Then finally, Molefi Kete Asante, African Pyramid of Knowledge, is also an important book in explaining the Afrocentric idea. Now I'll share my screen.
When it comes up, I'll be able to.
Yeah, you see it?
Alrighty. Do you want it full screen or you want it side by side?
Yeah, a full screen.
Okay.
A full screen is okay. But if you, anyway, it's full from my side. So if you can do it side by side over there, that's fine. But from my end, I already made it. Sorry?
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm saying, go ahead.
Okay. So the screen is showing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So this is the flyer that is out there: spirituality versus science. Which is better for Black people or Black communities around the world? This topic, I question this topic very much, and I'm going to show you how, because when they called me, as I was saying in the beginning of my intro, I said I'm not against science. And most of African civilizations, when you look at them, spirituality coexisted with science. It answers some specific needs in terms of people understanding, giving meaning to life, and science was also crucial in then understanding the natural environment. So I said there is no way I can be against science. This sounds to me like the church versus the state. This is a European phenomenon and a European experience. The church versus the state was very crucial at the European history, where they had to make a choice because the church was interfering with scientific progress in some extent, and the political state religion was trying to suppress scientific advancement. So a choice had to be made. So this is a European experience, and it pained me each time that European experience have to necessarily become the African experience. I think that is overgeneralization, and I question it. And here is the evidence: a text message which I sent to Sarnetta in
one
August.
second.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
Can you do this? Can you go to? Let me see if I can blow that up so I can see it myself. If you can go to where it says slideshow at the top of your screen.
Okay, I should stop sharing first.
It's gonna say No. Where on your screen
where it says slideshow.
Correct. Click on that.
Okay.
All right, and then click where it says from this current slide.
From this current slide, where is that?
On the left, on the far left.
Okay.
Right there.
Yes. Is it showing now?
Hold on. No, it's still showing up as okay. Let's do this. So unshare your presentation.
Okay, so I should stop sharing then from my end.
Stop sharing. Yes, from your end. All righty. Well, no, it's still okay. So go to present again and then share screen.
Well, everything went on automatic. Now the screen is large screen, so I can't even change anything anymore. I don't know. It went into full screen and
what's the name game on?
No.
Because
showing all the slides.
I can see you, and so when you go to present at the bottom and go to share screen, should be a dialog box that pops up, and it's going to give you three choices: Chrome tab, window, entire screen. So make sure that you click on the tab that says entire screen, and then
the problem. Yeah, I'm on full screen. The problem is I can't see any icon that will even go back. If I touch anything, it just changes to another slide.
No. I'm sorry. Press escape on your keyboard. Okay. Now are you back on the screen in terms of
yes?
Okay. So now go back into where it says at the bottom of your screen, it says present.
At the bottom.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let me go back then.
So you see,
present, yes.
All right, share screen.
Share screen.
Correct. Now, do you see a tab that says entire screen?
Yes.
All righty. So click on that, and then you're going to see an image is going to just be reflecting your desktop screen. So make sure you click it, and there's a blue box around it. And then click
I
on
see
share.
the entire desktop screen.
Yeah. So so click on it so that you see a blue box around it, a blue line around it, and then click on the blue share button. Click on the blue share button.
Okay.
Right.
I did that.
All right. So now when you go to on your screen, going back to your PowerPoint, go back to that same link at the top that says slideshow, and then from this slide where you were before. So now you see the difference is your screen is full now. So you can click that hide next to stop sharing. Don't click stop sharing, just click hide.
I should click what? Hide.
Yes, hide.
All right.
There we go. We're good to go. So I'm sorry for the interruption. All right, there we go.
Okay, it's okay. So now for sharing, how I just keep clicking because it doesn't show me how to move to the next slide because it's just full screen. So I just keep hitting, then it will share, right? Asar is there.
My bad, I was on mute. Yes, you can click or you can click the right and left arrow on your keyboard.
All right. Okay, that happened. That's good. All right. So sorry, guys. Sorry for the interruption. But that was a good interruption because it helped us put the technical things together. So this is Monday, August the 7th. I saw the flyer, and by the way, I took permission from Sarnetta to share this conversation because I did tell him to change the title. And I also got permission from him today that I will be sharing this, that I did send him this message and he approved. He even said I can call him if I want and he can defend that. So I told him that this is the title that I discussed with you on the phone and with Ankh. Said for Black progress, can spirituality and science coexist? Go upstairs, I'm busy. So for Black progress, I even repeated it twice to add the for Black progress, can spirituality and science coexist? This is what I anticipated. This is my point of argument. This is what I said on the phone to Ankh. This is what I said to Sarnetta. And the flyer, for some reason, did not change to reflect this. And I take responsibility because I still went into the debate. And I still felt that even though he knows my point, and then the title is still saying versus, I said, no problem, let's still go into debate. I will still make my point very clear. And I see no way you can win this debate, except you will get one vote, and that vote will come from Tiffany. Tiffany, are you in the building? You gave the only vote he had, it came from Tiffany. Okay, let's continue. So, this is the way I divided my debate topics into three. One, I decided to address the issue in part one. It was for the search of reality and meaning. This idea of what is real and what is not real. How do we look at reality? Objective reality is the only reality that that constitute real. And then even if we see reality, then what is the meaning? Is very important, and that's what I intend to address. The impact to spirituality and progress, because all of these things we are discussing is whether we can make progress, and that makes us to define what progress is, and how does spirituality, if it is added to science or if we practice it along with science, does it lead to impediment? That's what you need to know. Will they lead to impediment that will not allow us to move forward, or it will actually help us also grow alongside in a holistic growth. It's going to help us have a very holistic growth in our human journey. So for me, I try to explain it in very, very extensively. Then part 3, the danger of scientific materialism. Here I begin to show the lack of ethics, morality, and the lack of the meaninglessness in modern science. Science for the sake of science, knowledge for the sake of knowledge. There is actually no meaning. There is actually no reason why we should actually be seeking a path where science is always questioned to see whether it is operating within that path that we are seeking, so that we don't lead to self-destruction. I also address this, and you can already see the color, the hidden messages in the colors. You can all decipher that by yourself. And I invoke Jehuti for a reason. You can see him on the flyer. You can also do your own analysis of why I invoke Jehuti. Now here, I made my argument very clear before the debate started. I said, number one, both spirituality and natural sciences are part of African cultural heritage. That means we lay the foundation, we lay the blocks. So if they are incompatible in the first place, there's no way we should be able to make any scientific progress. That will constitute a contradiction. But the fact that we are the foundation of these both things, and it strived in many of our civilization, it means then the dichotomy we are trying to create is foreign. Then number 2, I said both fields are equally relevant to African material and immaterial progress. And number 3, I said, I do not advocate for the replacement of science with spirituality. That is exchanging the church for the state as the Europeans see it, or vice versa. This is now what we are arguing. Replace the state with the church, or the church with the state. It's the European dichotomy that we are not trying to argue at all. Number 4, as a spiritual process does not equal scientific method, but both share empirical basis. This is where even some spiritual people make a mistake, because they think that spirituality also equals scientific method. I argue that the way modern science operates, it has a specific paradigm, and that paradigm is very specific in its deductive in its approach, because it uses a theory and it leads to that very, it uses that very theory to find facts. So that's not how necessarily spiritual process work. However, at the end of the day, when you look at all of them, they operate from empirical basis, that is experience. It's very important. What did you experience? What's your experience? Then part 5, I said, what I hope to argue tonight is that African spirituality is essential to African cultural identity, values, interests, and principles. If we are a people, and I make a distinction between what you call a social location and a social location versus a cultural group. A social location is where, for example, you said these people are refugees. So you put all of them in a box and say they are refugees. Refugee is not a culture. It does not constitute a historical experience. It does not have any kind of attached values. It just society puts you in the box called refugee. So you are forced to be in that box because there's a characterization of society. It's called social location. For example, too, if they say Black people, and we often take this general description. Is it a social location or is it a cultural group? If Black people is just a social location, then we cannot make progress within that description, because the society named us. We don't have no cultural solidarity. Being Black people does not constitute values. Being Black people does not constitute interests and principles. So we are just passing around in a box called Black people, but we don't have a goal. We don't have a common goal. We don't have a common interest. We are not fighting for anything together. That would be different from Jews, who have a common interest and goal. So their success is very predictable. That's different from what you call Europeans. Europeans boast of their Western identity, and they operate with that, and all of their achievement is towards the defense of that Western value. That's why America can put billions of dollars to defend Ukraine and cannot pay reparation to some of its citizens who have been suffer historical injustice because they are defending a value and a principle which their country is identified with. So Black people, is it a interest, values, or cultural group, or you think it's just a social location? So I intend to also argue that our spirituality is put us in an area where we now become a cultural group. That's why it's important. Then part one, dealing with the topic. I will not show every slide I show in the debate. I might jump over some for the sake, because this is just a summary. So part one, what I did is the search for reality and meaning. So here I invoke Molefi Asante, where in his book, The Egyptian Philosophy, on page 1, he said, to understand African ways of thinking, it is necessary to suspend for a while the linearity and to consider the entire world, even the universe or universes, as one large system where everything is connected and interconnected. This is the principle of African view of reality. People, don't let this to jump over your head. What he's saying here, that of all African wisdom, all of them, whether you're in West Africa, East Africa, when you understand the traditional wisdom, how they view the universe and reality, for them, everything is everything. What that means is that nothing exists exclusively on its own. You take a bicycle, for example. If you say a bicycle, does the bicycle exist? Everyone will say, yeah, we see the bicycle is distinct from a car, is distinct from a television, is distinct from a human being. The bicycle exists. But if you take away all the components that make up the bicycle and return them to their origin, you take the tire and return it to the plastic or rubber or synthetic material where it was made, you take all the aluminum that's in the bicycle and return them to the natural suboxide, you return everything on the bicycle, the air in the tire, you release it to the atmosphere, you find out that the bicycle really does not exist as on its own. It is actually manifesting an existence that is actually borrowed from all other reality. So the bicycle standing on its own appears to exist as a thing. But in reality, when you break it down, it is only manifesting the totality of other things around it. So when you look at the universe from that angle, you see that everything is interconnected. This is very crucial to understanding African worldview. So I use this slide here. Sheikh Anta Diop explained very clearly how African should proceed and how Africans should see today's world in terms of what they contributed to civilization and how they should perceive their progress and what are the things they should really look at in terms of making progress. He said, when we say that the ancestors of Blacks who today live mainly in Black Africa were the first to invent mathematics, astronomy, the calendar, science in general, art, a religion. And he uses the word religion here is the terminology of his time. All spiritual tradition were considered religion. Even today, some people still do that. It's understandable for its use of language. Agriculture, social organization, medicine, writing, technique, architecture. And that these were the first, and they were the first to erect buildings out of 6 million tons of stones and Great Pyramid as architect and engineer. Consequently, the Black man must become able to restore the continuity of his national historical past, to draw from it the moral advantage needed to conquer his place in the modern world. So for Diop, we lay the foundation of these things. Now, in order for us to reconquer our place, we must restore the continuity of our national historical past, to draw from the moral advantage needed to conquer our place in the modern world. Now, restoration should be part of the African progress, because we cannot jump on the bandwagon called progress by any other group of people, forgetting that we had an experience in the last 400 years. Languages were taken away. Our way of viewing reality was taken away. Our entire psychological experience and everything, and all aspects or factors of our identity was attacked. So now when we jump on a bandwagon called progress, then we don't want to visit, we'll go back and look at some of our wisdom traditions, look at our languages and see how they can constitute progress and redefine it to suit what we are trying to really achieve. But if we jump on a bandwagon called progress, then the European will tell us that progress must happen in an English language. It must happen either as atheists or as agnostics, or it must happen in terms of you must be Christian or Muslim, or it must happen. They will give you boxes. But when you do the restoration, then you define that box by yourself. So, one of my slides gone out. I don't know what happened. So here, they debate, insist that we must understand spirituality and science and see whether a dichotomy exists and whether they are compatible at all. And that's what I try to do. So I look at encyclopedia, the etymology of the word science is very important, because sometimes it seems like people present science as like it is a thing that exists on its own, that it exists exclusively by itself, while in reality, science just had a very humble beginning. It was just a way to know. When you look at this online etymology dictionary, 14th century, said the state of fact of knowing what is known, knowledge, acquiring by study, information, also assurance of knowledge, certitude, certainty, from Old French knowledge, to learn, application, So these were, it all boils down to the end here, what they call to know, the ability to know something. That's what science really is. But I love the definition given by this Buddhist monk, Dalai Lama. He says science is first and foremost an empirical understanding the nature of the physical and the living world. It is essentially a mode of inquiry that gave us fantastically detailed knowledge of the empirical world and the underlying law of nature, which we infer from empirical data. Science proceeds by means of a very specific method that involves measurement, quantification, the intersubjective verification through repeatable experiment. This is how science works. You are talking about empirical data, you are talking about specific method, you are talking about involvement verification. But he says something. He said, within this model, many aspects of human existence, including values, creativity, and spirituality, as well as deeper metaphysical questions, lie outside the scope of scientific inquiry. That's very important, because just because we are able to study nature through verification, through measurement, through quantification, does not mean that we have answered the totality of the question of reality, or we have understood the meaning of existence. That's why Dalai Lama said there are things that are laid outside this methodology, and those things include values, creativity, spirituality, as well as deeper metaphysical questions that lie outside the scope of inquiry. It's very important. So I made a summary table to be able to make people to understand what science really is and why we should not put it against spirituality. In my summary table here, I say science operates from a deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, that means specific. And that deductive reasoning operates by observing objective reality, something that I can look at. There is an observer and there's an object to be observed. Then you proceed by getting empirical data, then verification method, which will go by experiment and measurement and finding facts. Now, this deductive is very effective because it operates by looking at a specific paradigm, a specific theory, but it ignores other variables. It has to ignore other variables in order for us to arrive at a very specific conclusion. Example, if we say every car made from 1998 until the 2000 were using diesel, every car made from 1998 to the year 2000 used diesel. So if I have that theory as my working theory, and a friend told me, I just bought a car and it was made in the year 1998 and 1999, I would say, oh, this car must be using diesel because that's the theory I'm using. And if I find out that this car is not using diesel at all, it's using some other energy source, then my theory have a problem. Then I begin to, because I'm already having a very specific deductive method of me looking at it. So if there's only one thing that is contrary to what I have as a theory, then the whole theory fall apart. This deductive reasoning, that is how it works. But it ignores. So now I'll go to the definition of spirituality. I have to jump this video by John Henry Clark. So spirituality here is defined by our great here, Kaba Kamane, who wrote a book, Spirituality Before Religion, on page 44. He says spirituality is a state of consciousness, a profound expanded awareness. That's what you need to know. It is, first of all, a consciousness, an awareness. Awareness about what? Okay? You are aware that you are part of something greater still. That I know that I exist. I know the universe exists. I know that everything exists. But that those facts that I know does not constitute meaning, does not give the totality of meaning of why existence should exist. So he said, spirituality, first of all, start with a question, or realization, which is a state of consciousness or profound expanded awareness, a state of being in which a human develop knowledge and will to free their own soul from the chains of their own latent divine physical body to develop inner vision. The inner vision here is very important because this is no longer dealing with objective reality. It is dealing with the inner vision. And people have problem with people having inner vision, but you have to understand that the totality of reality constitute also our inner experiences. So that's where spirituality proceeds from. Marimba Ani said the apprehension of cosmic interrelationship, the apperception of meaning in existence, and the degree to which one is motivated by such meaning. Spirituality is one's ability to relate to the metaphysical level of experience. It unites thoughts and feelings, thereby allow for intuitive understanding. So Marimba Ani here used some specific word that we need to look at. Is first of all, is an apprehension. The same thing Kaba said is an awareness. And the purpose of this awareness is meaning in existence, to find meaning. Okay, quite different from the way the science try to understand facts, understand meaning in existence. And this meaning, a degree to which is motivated by such meaning now motivates us to be able to do science. It is such meaning that motivate us to even put our science into practice. Spirituality is one's ability to relate to the metaphysical level of experience, and it unites thoughts and feelings, because usually we are taught in Western psychology to ignore our feelings, that our feelings are lies. Our feelings, only our thoughts are real, but our feelings are illusion. But feelings are part of senses, okay, that we must also take cognizance of, thereby allow intuitive understanding. So it's very important. So here we have also the Royal School of Psychiatry in the UK. They gave a secular definition of spirituality. This is spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or a sense that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experience, that are greater and whole, in which we are part of a cosmic divine in nature. So what they are saying, that there is something, I believe that I am part of something greater still. Just like I gave you the example in the beginning, a bicycle saying that I am a bicycle, I exist, but I do not have I am part of something greater still. The bicycle would be right. If the bicycle said, my physical existence just as a bicycle is actually not exclusive. I am part of other different part of reality. My exclusive existence, it does not really make any meaning. I am part of something greater still. The bicycle will make sense because everything that make up that bicycle is related to all other things around it. And if you go back to the very beginning of the universe, all of that thing will become one. This is the understanding of spirituality, to say we are part of everything and we are part of something greater still. Now I have a summary table for the spiritual process. So I said spiritual process, you use the inductive reasoning instead of the deductive reasoning that you saw with the science. So the inductive reasoning, it proceeds by looking at patterns. I look at patterns in nature, and therefore I infer, I make inference. So if I look, for example, that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. I know that. So if I get lost in a forest and I see smoke from somewhere, I can infer that there should be fire over there. It's not irrational for me to make such a conclusion, because using the inductive reasoning, we look at pattern in nature and we are able to find meaning. So we proceed with subjective consciousness. And consciousness, in fact, is both science and spirituality need consciousness. And consciousness is a property of the subjective. So contemplation is very necessary in spirituality, and refined attention, because it is a contemplative tradition. It's based on deep contemplation. What is the meaning of this? Why do I exist? What is my relationship with the totality of existence? Why should I even practice morality in the first place? Why should I relate with the ultimate reality? These are questions in spirituality. Inner vision. These inner vision, it's very important, because people think that by inner vision, we just mean anybody that have any illusion, any kind of illusional thought, then it constitutes spirituality. No, there is a training. That's why spiritual tradition has specific training, how you control your thought, how you control your feeling, how you control, in order for you to have a clear understanding of what we call inner vision. Spirituality is also an experience. People have experiences, and these experiences may not constitute what you would call scientific fact, because subjective experiences cannot be studied using verification method and all of these things. But these experiences can constitute truth and reality for people in a subjective level. So the entire meaning of spirituality is to find meaning. Finding meaning is very important. Finding meaning in existence. So I will forward here very quickly. So here, all of reality that we know, it is said that science tells us that everything in reality that we know starts from the Big Bang. And it is the Big Bang that explains our existence. And this Big Bang is 13 billion years ago. There was just this flash, and this thing, the subatomic particles and quantum fluctuation, inflation happened, and suddenly, boom, this thing exploded and gave birth to our galaxies and gave birth to the planet, and eventually biological beings evolved, and then sentient beings evolved out of all of this. Now, when you look at this, you cannot say that they constitute meaning of existence. It does not even tell you the origin of matter itself, what constitutes its origin. It only tells us what happened, how the matter behaved once they came into existence. Because subatomic particles were already in existence at this level. But we are only explaining here what happened when they came into existence. But why they came into existence remains a metaphysical question. That's why Diop said this very clearly. Let me get this quote. He said, all the world religions are organizing themselves on new basis to adapt to circumstances, as long as certain metaphysical problems are not resolved, affecting the origin of matter. And not for tomorrow, even scientists in large number will continue to maintain a religious faith. For Diop, as long as we don't know what started the Big Bang. We don't know what started matter. We don't know how these things, first of all, came into existence. It is very, very unfair for one to brush aside metaphysical questions, because these metaphysical questions are natural and real questions in human life, in human existence. They shape society. They shape how we see reality. Science ignore it because there is no scientific answer. So science use the deductive method to ignore this metaphysical question and to say, let's do science for the sake of science. Let's do it just for the sake of it and evolve and be powerful and control other nations. But what the metaphysical questions does is that it puts things into proper perspective. Because if we understand, for example, from the African view, that everything is everything, and everything boils down to that one, and that one we consider a divine, it means then we are related to the water, the planet, the animals, and everything. So there has to be objective morality. There has to be a very cautious way to proceed in relating with the rest of nature. But when this particular beginning question is ignored, then science will proceed from the basis of just materialism, because the Big Bang is material. But what constituted and why it started, let's ignore it and let's just do the science for the sake of we making progress. That's where it's become very crucial for spirituality and science. So I will jump over this Niels Bohr and question and go very quickly to African wisdom.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
I'm gonna need each and every one of you in the chat and those who are watching to that is right. Make sure that you hit the like button and share with your friends and colleagues. For those of you who are just joining us, we are here with our good brother Sekou Kelleh, and he is providing some of the slides from his recent presentation on African spirituality versus science, a debate that was on Sonetter's platform on September the 15th. So we're just getting some clarity on his position and some of the major points that he made during his presentation. So I apologize. Continue, good brother.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So now that brings us to what is African spirituality? How do we understand it? And in order for us to put it against science or to know whether it can work in harmony with science, let's understand what it is in the first place. And that's where I come to what I call the sources of African tradition, or the sources of African wisdom tradition. Here I use a PhD dissertation by Kaikosa Kajangu, a very good brother from University of California, Santa Barbara, who actually wrote an entire PhD trying to describe the African wisdom before colonialism and how it operated, and how the term spirituality that we are even using, how it was derived from that. So there are things he said very clearly. There are three sources to African wisdom tradition. And these three sources, if you don't know them, you end up just debating, but you are actually trying to mix the grain with the chaff. But if you understand these three different sources, then it's become very easy for you to do your research. The first source that you have out there is the colonial sources. And these colonial sources of African wisdom tradition, they are based on the colonial paradigm of trying to demonize other people just because you want to steal from them. If you want to steal, they say to kill a goat, you have to give it, or a dog, you give it a bad name. Then now you justify why you need to kill it. So they can come into Africa and steal resources and steal people and destroy the civilization and turn around and say they were great people. No, they have to demonize the people that they stole from. So now they justify what they have done. So when you read colonial sources, they present African wisdom as pre-logic, as primitive science, as people who were trying to understand science, but then they use it with superstition. That's where Ankh is always operating from. The second source, it is what known as the post-colonial sources. And these post-colonial sources of African wisdom tradition are Africans, Christian priests, African who converted to Christianity, become priests, and they find out that their tradition were demonized, and naturally they felt that it kind of affect their culture and their identity. So they try to do a cleanup. So what they do then is to reinterpret African tradition from a Christian perspective or from an Islamic perspective. For example, if you the works of Mbiti. So if you read works like Mbiti, being a Christian missionary, trying to explain African tradition from a Christian perspective, that's where they use terms like God, they use terms like angels, ancestor worship, and then heaven and hell, and then African having similar things and prophets and this and that. They just use false equivalents to be able to just make people to understand that African spirituality is the same as religion. Now, there is another school of thought or another interpretation or source of African wisdom tradition is which we call the reconstructive method, or some people will call it the Afrocentric method. Now, this method is based on the fact that the people go to the primary sources. They don't use the colonial interpretation. They don't use the Christian missionary post-colonial interpretation. They go to the primary sources. Some of them get even initiated into the secret, what the colonially called secret societies in Africa, which are not secret society, but wisdom centers. They get initiated and they say, what do you really teach? What is your worldview? And they compile this information. And these are the information we must use to understand African wisdom tradition today. If you interpret African wisdom tradition as Abrahamic religion, then you have fallen for the post-colonial method. If you interpret it as a primitive science, you fall for the colonial method. So these are the things you must avoid in your research. So here's what he said. He said, the organization in which I participated are known in the colonial literature as secret societies, an unfortunate label coined by architects of the colonial library to demonize the centers of wisdom of colonized people. Africa's centers of wisdom are not secret societies. Rather, they are elite organizations whose mission is to produce perfect human beings. While the search for perfection in these organizations are open to all, most people are not able to undertake the extreme demanding discipline. So he's saying that these wisdom schools are still available despite colonialism and slavery. Take their time to go get initiated and learn what these people really believe, because it requires a lot of discipline that some people don't really want to put themselves through. But the truth is, if you want to criticize the people, you want to understand what they believe, you must go to the source of their information, what they really teach. So equivalent our deities to Allah and Jehovah. Now, one of the most important documents in recent time that try to highlight African spirituality is the Encyclopedia of African Religion, edited by Molefi Kete Asante and Ama Mazama. So here they gave us the characteristics of the African epistemology, I live from the classical period. The epistemology is their approach to wisdom and knowledge, their theory of knowledge and totality, how they look at all knowledge and how they approach it in terms of discipline. So number one, he said the principle of intellectual humility and non-dogmatism. When you go to this wisdom school, dogma is rejected. Dogma is when you do not accept, when a truth is presented to you, is verifiable, and it is obvious, and you look at it, but then because of your religious doctrine, you reject it. That becomes dogma. That becomes very, very dogmatic, and it is not how African spirituality operates. It rejects a dogma. Then Number two, cosmodiendricity. I struggle to pronounce this word. Cosmodiendricity. It is how African perception of God is perceived from cosmotheology, if I will use another term for it. It is not the Abrahamic theology. It is the cosmotheology. We will discuss it later. Three, an ethical dimension with a focus on wisdom. For African, all wisdom, all knowledge, all science must proceed from an ethical dimension with a focus on wisdom. That means there must be morality, there must be discipline in all knowledge. When ethics are overlooked, knowledge itself can turn out to be dangerous. Number four, the rejection of knowledge for the sake of knowledge and art for the sake of art. Now, this is very important in understanding African wisdom tradition. It is not knowledge for the sake of knowledge. It is not science for the sake of science. It is not art for the sake of art. That's why when they look at some West African art, they look at Egyptian art. For European, it's just an amusement. Oh, this artwork is nice. Oh, this other artwork is not beautiful, it's primitive. Oh, this other artwork is more realistic. This is for them, the art were conveying messages. Every piece of art was created to convey either a spiritual information, or scientific information, or philosophical information. It was not just for the sake of art and amusement as we have it today. So science was not just for the sake of science. It was for the sake of protecting life. It was for the sake of seeing how best can we protect all of life and existence. That's not the approach today. Number five, the rejection of opposition between individual and community. This is African wisdom tradition, is to say that an individual cannot be put above the community. This is an Ubuntu concept. Number six, a holistic perspective and focus on the interconnectedness and balance of reality. I said that in the beginning. Number seven, an integration of various disciplines and a rejection of opposition between reason and cognitive faculties. Now, this integration of discipline is what my opponent was arguing against. Because for him, the integration of discipline means that we don't know the limit of spirituality, we don't know the limit of science, we don't know the limit of chemistry, we don't know the limit of biology, we mix it up. So when a man's bone is broken, for example, and in classical Africa, and he is brought to me that Mr. XYZ leg is broken, how do we fix his leg? In his reasoning or understanding, the African will pour libation or will be calling on Ogun to come and fix the broken bone. That's not, even today in traditional Africa, that's not how it works. When your bone is broken in a traditional African society, you are taken to a bone specialist. It is the bone specialist who fixes your problem. Now, if you suffer emotional problem from that bone damage, it affects your reasoning, it affects you in another way, then they will ask you to go and see someone else who is able to provide remedy for that. So the integration of discipline doesn't mean that they do not understand how each discipline functions. It doesn't mean then they don't know how the season work, how to plant their crops, how you don't throw your crops just in a pool of river and expect it to grow, but you need a fertile ground and you need to control flood. They know these things. So to even think that the integration of discipline in African epistemology means then they don't understand the difference between agriculture and astronomy is very, very unfortunate that people will have such a thinking. Imhotep was an architect. He was also a priest. He understood the disciplines. So it wasn't that they were confused. They didn't know that each discipline has to be approached with a method. We will see shortly that they do, but they integrate them because they had an objective. The objective is what they were looking at. It was not for the sake of this discipline, is that what will this discipline achieve in the collective. Then number 8, the rejection of opposition between sacred and profane. I have to go back. So for the European, you hear a word like secular. This is secular and this is religious. This is secular and this is religious. For Africans, these opposition that have been created must be very careful about it. When something is secular, then there's a way they approached it. It means then it doesn't constitute holy. It doesn't constitute being special. It can then, society can decide to turn it how they like. So for us, everything is, you cannot separate it so that this is sacred and this is profane. Everything is holy. Everything is important. And being important and holy does not mean we can't question it. So that's what I'm saying. You got to get out of this Eurocentric paradigm to understand the African wisdom tradition, how it works. Now, the question of God, we will apply it now to see how it works with African epistemology and in terms of comparing it with religion and the science. So Credo Mutua, I read here from his book, 1964 page that is written called Indaba My Children. On page 560 to 561, he goes to be initiated. Remember, I tell you the sources of wisdom in African tradition is very important. He goes to go get initiated in Southern Africa in his the Zulu tradition, and he wanted to know what God is, what is the meaning of God, and the teacher in that wisdom school decided to teach Credo Mutua their concept of God. Then it goes like this. He said the Bantu believe in the existence of God, but their concept of God is different from that of other races. Now the teacher is speaking now to Credo Mutua. My child, you know from the teaching of your parents that every child is taught that there is a great God and there is also the lesser gods. But you do not know just what the great God, whom we shall call the most ultimate God, is. This you shall be told to this day. The most ultimate God, who is the God of gods, is everything in everything. Now, I want you to pause and pay attention to put away your Eurocentric approach. Put away the Abrahamic approach, our Father in heaven, or Allah talking to Muhammad from the mountain. Put all of those things in the closet for a minute and think about this. God is everything in everything. What does it mean? What does it mean? This is where you need to interrogate African wisdom tradition from their sources, because no Abrahamic tradition is going to make this statement. Maybe the closest you will have will be the Sufi Muslim, where they actually came close to this understanding, but the Muslim kind of called them as heretics for making such a comment. But this is what Africans have believed all along. The Muslim came close to it through Ibn Arabi. Okay, Wudud al-Wadad, where he said the unity of being. Everything is everything. Okay, it's a very profound intellectual achievement, but you guys jump over it and look at the statue and say because it's Ogun and it's Obatala, and so therefore there is a God in the sky. Calm down. Go to the wisdom school and look at the primary sources and forget the colonial sources and the Christian reconstruction of our tradition. Now, I will play a little video here to listen to Ifa, a professor of philosophy, African philosophy from the University of Ibadan, a Yoruba woman called Professor Sophie Oluwole, who actually did her PhD in the Yoruba language and understanding the Orishas and everything. She gave her a clear explanation. I hope this video, during the debate, they said it wasn't audible enough. So, I go back. Let me see if it's going to play this time. No, it's not playing. Well, it's not playing, unfortunately. So I will jump over the video. Now, the Igbo cosmology. When you look at this, to understand the people's wisdom and how they view reality, you need to understand their cosmology, because it is from their cosmology, their concept of reality, just as science begins with Big Bang. And that's cosmology. It is describing how the universe came into being in the first place. That's where you proceed from to be able to know. So when you look at the Abrahamic religion, they always start with, let there be light. A deity appeared and said, let there be light, and then things start happening. Okay, when you look at our wisdom tradition, they give a very profound scientific origin of the universe. Then they proceed to also give some spiritual account of it. So look at this Igbo cosmology. They are talking about a cosmic womb that God constitute this cosmic womb, which is beginning. And this beginning had two forces that emerge in it, the strong force and the yielding force. And these two forces constitute the all within this cosmic womb, which then gave birth to all of reality, just like an egg. So when you read from this book here, the Holy Odu, which is the Yoruba compilation of Yoruba wisdom tradition, it says here the womb is expressed as Olodumare. Because if you Google Olodumare right now, they're going to say it means God. But here's what it's saying in this holy book. It said the womb, which is origin, is expressed as Olodumare in Yoruba, Mau in Fon, Chineke in Igbo, Mumbi in Kukuyu. This womb then gave birth to male and female as strong and yielding energy. And this strong and yielding energy became polarities expressed in the world as complementary opposite. So you can't be speaking of religion here. You can't be speaking of religion here. You are speaking of a people who had science, and you are speaking of a people also who have a spiritual understanding. So you cannot brush them into our religion. It will be a mistake. So you can find the same narrative in the book, the Book of the Dead, chapter 15. You will find a similar narrative of the universe coming into being from an egg. You find similar narrative there. So here, let's look at the Yoruba cosmology from the same book. It said the supreme being, Olorun, is genderless. It constitutes unity. Whenever they use the word supreme being, for them, it constitutes unity. That is everything and everything. The same thing Credo Mutua said. Now, this is a West African, and Credo Mutua is coming from Southern Africa. How do they come to the same conclusion? That goes to some of you who say, oh, there are many African traditions. You guys don't agree. Why are you, which African tradition are you describing? Well, there is a fundamental Pan-African understanding of African spirituality. And there is a lot of commonality among them, which like you can even practice any one you want or all of them. You will be fine. Here you see, it constitutes unity. When we use the word Olodumare, we say it constitutes unity. So that tells you there is an abstract description of saying that everything is everything in one will constitute that creative force. That's different from a concrete description somebody will give and say that, Muhammad will say, for example, I went into heaven physically and I entered and I had interaction with Abraham and Allah spoke to me and gave me prayers. This is not what you are experiencing here. If you choose to put them in the same box, you are doing it because you have not taken your time to look at your own culture. Now, I hear my opponent, when we were before the debate, I went through some of his videos, and he said that he believes his God is his mother and father. And I hear Reggie make the same statement, my God is my mother and father. And this is supposed to mean then because they are concrete, they are physical, they can be seen. I can see your mother and father, or even if I didn't see that, I can infer that they existed, because the fact that I see you, I know that you couldn't have existed without a male and female coming together to produce you. So even without seeing your parent, I infer that you were born from a male and a female. So that conclusion, they say, my God is my mother and father. I said, well, that's what the Africans said. If you look at Amun here with his symbol, he sat down with his female counterpart. Now, people who are drawn coming from the tradition of literal description, for them, this is a God sitting with his wife. No, for the African, this is a principle in the universe of a masculine energy or female energy, or you will call it yielding force and a strong force, or whatever you will call it, that unite together to produce life. So even if you create a formula, life is equal to mother and father. I said that is true. But rewind that life, that mother and father, multiply it backward till before Big Bang. What are you going to have? You are going to have one singular force that contains everything and everything within it. You can even reduce that everything and everything into a minus and plus, negative, positive, or into one, and that constitutes beginning. Or you can say that was a cosmic womb that had everything and everything contained in it. So this is how the African have proceeded. This is the Dogon on the left, the Dogon primordial twin backward. So you have to conclude that these people had science and they were also having a spiritual vision of the world. They were not confused at all. Just because you don't understand their symbolism doesn't mean you can just brush it down into religion or you brush it to some kind of empty spiritual speculation. So I will push. Now, interesting here also is the cosmology of the Congo, which coming here from Fukuyao, where he described very clearly something you will almost be tempted to say the Big Bang. The Congo's cosmology is that a force was complete by itself, and Kalunga emerged from the Mbongi, the emptiness or nothingness. Oh, I go back a little bit. And became the source of life, Moyo, Wawo, Muunza, on earth. That is the Kalunga, a complete force by itself, fired up into the Mbongi and overran and dominated it. And heated force blew up down as a huge, I cut off the rest of the quotation. But look at the images on the top. In this cosmology, they are saying that in the beginning you have this cosmic zero. And the cosmic zero, which you might use the word nothingness because the English language is so empty, we have to, I mean, it's so weak, we have to use the word nothingness because there is no such a thing as nothingness. Because nothingness will just mean that some totality of everything, which was this cosmic zero. But within it, he said, the Kalunga emerged, an uncreated force emerged out of it, and then it blew itself up. You can see here the B image, and began to give birth to other existence. So this process is an evolutionary process of something coming into being. These are not people saying, oh, let there be light, and there was light, and then somebody was yelling from somewhere. We don't even know where he was standing from, and he was saying, let there be light, like a magician. That's not what you see here. You see a process. You must appreciate the scientific thinking of your people. Even if you say today, this process, modern science is explained it better than this. Yes, science has to evolve. But we are saying to look at it from the very beginning, how they were looking at it tells you that they were both scientific and they were spiritual. They were not confused. And how it's explained here, if you see in the same book, but I got this other image from Wikipedia, but they got the explanation from the same book, I believe, is that they divided reality into two. The Nseke, which is the physical world, the empirical world, the world we can measure, the world we can see, the world that we will call scientific, objective reality, physical universe. They do not deny it. They exist. It's called the Nseke. And that is where we can be able, our science can be able to measure all things. We can be able to see how bodies moved. It is a reality. But this physical reality had a beginning. And this unknown beginning, this beginning which cannot be assessed through our five senses, is what they are describing as the Egyptian call it underworld. From then they call it Musone. And this part is where life must have started and then emerge into physical reality. So the coming into being will constitute what they call a kala, like a fire coming into being. And life is a cycle, goes round, and we go back again into death. And death does not constitute nothingness. Death then will not constitute that the person is lost. So their spirituality is telling you that the mere fact that I can objectively see a dead man lying down on the bed, and I take and bury him, and I say then that's the end. He has gone into nothingness. From the African worldview, he did not come out of nothingness. So there's no way he will return into nothingness. He came out of somethingness, so he has only been infused into another somethingness, which we might not physically have access to it, but he has been recycled into existence. He is not lost because everything is everything. There is no nothingness. Death, from the observer perspective, the person is gone. But from their worldview, The person has only been recycled into another dimension of life which we don't have access. But definitely they return back into being, because life is coming into being and going out of being, coming into being. So there is no some such thing that the person gone into nothingness. He doesn't exist anymore. No, he has only moved from your dimension of looking at it. So this is the way they view the world. And that's prompted the creation you saw in Kemet. They view that it's a continuity of life. So they took time with their science. They took time in building it, and they built mega project because it's a continuity of life. That's why worldview matters on how you see reality. I will fast forward this part on ancient Egypt. Okay, here I will come to a very important point from this great philosopher here who wrote this book, Mbok Basson, African Religion from Quantum Cosmology to the Symbolism of God. He is one of the prominent African scholars right now in terms of African spirituality. He said in the African thought, God has been a source of deep observation and rational analysis of facts of universal creation. From this perspective, he is not an object of revelation. I repeat that. From this perspective, he is not an object of revelation imposed on other people by so-called enlightened individuals. What he's saying here, Africans are not saying there is a God who came to heaven to come and tell them that he is God. He's talking to them. Heaven is open. Angels came down. Sons of men came down with the daughters of God, and God revealed himself, I am God. This is not the African approach. Okay? I'm Muhammad in the mountain, and then the angel came down to him, and they said, I mean, this God is in a particular geographical location, somewhere in space, is an alien, and then he's sending people because he's limited by geography, and sometimes he's limited by language. Then he's sending people down to come and talk to people. This is not the African way. The Africans have come to the conclusion of what they call divine from observation of nature. From observation, they analyze that everything is rewind back, it will be rewind into one. And that one must constitute within itself the totality of everything and everything. This is an observational approach to the divine. It is not a theology or a revelation coming to them. That's why when an Arab or Abrahamic people come to us and say, God told them to come and convert us, we tell them you are a liar, because that's not how we approach the question of the divine. So Obenga stressed this, tried to explain very clearly how spirituality and science coexisted in Kemet. And even the Greeks at that time were a little bit confused about this method. So they came to ancient Egypt to ask about their method of science and how they blended with their culture and their intellectual activities. So a Greek asked as a priest of Egypt to explain this paradigm. And that's what Obenga documented in his book, African Holistic Paradigm of Knowledge, African Philosophy, on page 126. He said, incidentally, an old Egyptian priest describing the pharaonic system to Solon. Solon was a Greek philosopher. As one, I repeat this again. Incidentally, an old Egyptian priest describing the pharaonic system to Solon as one whole, all of whose aspect, element, and component were connected and independent, explained. As for the intellectual life, the Egyptian priest is speaking now. As for the intellectual life, you observe, no doubt, what cared the Lord among us Egyptians, the universe. Our Lord organized all discoveries, down to divination and medicine, whose concern is health. From speculation about divinities, it has derived human application and supervised the acquisition of all other knowledge generated therefrom. This is very important. He said, our law, that means their system, has organized all discoveries down to divination, medicine. That means you are talking science here, you are talking spirituality, whose concern is health. It is life. You see, from the speculation about divinities, it has derived human application supervise the acquisition of all other knowledge generated therefrom. Very important. So I try to show here, for example, how in ancient Egypt, they knew the various disciplines. They knew the various disciplines, and what it was purposely put together to achieve a particular goal. For example, I give the Iber Papyrus. In the Iber Papyrus, you get it here from Obenga's book, page 371. There are 3 terms there describing professionals. There was the word Senui for doctor. There was the Shem Web, which was the priest, or who was considered a surgeon, translated as surgeon. Then you have the Saul, which is a magician or an exorcist. So it's very important here. Why did they give name to 3 different professionals in one papyrus that were supposed to do a particular job, but at least they distinguished their discipline? They mention a doctor, a practitioner, Senui. Then they mention a priest, who could also be a surgeon. Then they mention a magician in the same papyrus. Now, here what Obenga said. He said, introduction to this. Now we are reading the papyrus translation. Introduction to the secret law of the doctor, knowledge of the heart movement and of the heart. There are vessels inside leading to each chamber. Tells when a doctor or a surgeon or an exorcist places his hand or fingers on the head. Now it goes into detail to describe how to kind of diagnose the illness of the heart. But what is important here, it mentioned 3 disciplines, and these 3 professionals are supposed to learn science still, are supposed to follow a method in trying to diagnose illness. It doesn't matter whether they were priest, it doesn't matter whether they were doctor or magician, they were also subjected to learning the lore of the doctor. So here it's important to know that these people, it's not that they were confused, it's not that they didn't know that who a doctor is, or they didn't know who a priest supposed to be, or who a magician supposed to be, because in the eyes of Ankh, Africans didn't know the difference. For them, a magician was the scientist, so therefore we didn't even understand scientific concept. Yes, they do, and that's the evidence from this Iber Papyrus. And when it comes to Mars, in the Rin Papyrus, you have all the modern scientific terminology that you might ever think were created today. Tep accept, correct method. Okay, you have here a head, all things objective, fact, nature itself. You have this other one here, star, secret, mysterious, hidden, or difficult. They even have the word for mysterious. Then re, to know, to understand, to learn, knowledge. These are not people who did not know science or did not know spirituality. And I will fast forward to other things here. Now, Obenga explained it here very clearly. He said cosmogenesis, divination, medicine, divinity, humanity, and social sciences, in short, all branches of knowledge, theoretical and technical, basic and applied, were equally value component of the intellectual life. All these aspects were unified from within to provide a comprehensive vision of reality. This is the African way, the African epistemology. Very important. I repeat it again. Cosmogenesis, divination, medicine, divinity, humanity, social science, in short, all branches of knowledge, theoretical and technical, basic and applied, were equally value component of the intellectual life. All these aspects were unified from within to provide a comprehensive vision of reality. This is Obenga. He said this was the way the African saw it. So when you hear them say, oh, Obenga, oh, he did not talk about African spirituality, I say, what book did you read? You see, what book did you read? So very quickly, I will forward these ones a bit because of time. Spirituality and progress. You know, my opponent was saying that the reason we need to just do spirituality is for us to make progress, you know, make progress so that we can lead. Scientific literacy will lead to Black liberation. We will now be scientists all over the place, and we will be able to change our destiny. Sounds good. But let's look at progress. The idea of progress for European, according to Marimba Ani on page 495 of her book, Yurugu, the idea of progress for Europeans is a philosophy of change. As such, tend to support any innovation, anything new. Wherever the force lead is by definition good. Whereas in the context of other worldview, what could be defined as progress activity depends on the concretized goal. When you are discussing progress from the African perspective, you have to look at the goal. What is the goal? It's just science for the sake of science, scientific literacy for the sake of scientific literacy. We, the last 400 years, have lost our languages for higher learning, have lost our sovereignty, economic sovereignty, have lost our cultural value. We are everything but ourselves. Black people want to be Jews. Black people want to be Aboriginal of somewhere. Black people want to be Chinese black, maybe. Some want to be Buddhist. Some want to be, I don't know, maybe Marines or any kind of life, as long as they are not Africans. That is a big problem. So progress for us have to be reconstruction, recollecting our value. And I give Japan as an example that Japanese have not left their culture. They practice their Shinto religion and they are still spiritual. Here, and they are still scientific. Here is the Confucius Institute at the University of Ghana. I don't know, many of you have seen this before. Let me drink water.
And make sure that you all like the video and continue to share and keep it going in the chat. Go ahead, brother.
So how many of you have heard that Chinese government is atheist? And Chinese government is atheist since the time of Mao Zedong. So therefore they became prosperous because they abandoned their spirituality and they focused on the materialistic philosophy, and that made the Chinese CPP party to evolve. Well, I have good news for you, or I have news for you. The Chinese government that proclaimed itself atheist from the time of Mao, actually the government does not reflect the reality of the population, because majority of the population, they still practice their ancestral spirituality, Buddhism, they practice Confucius philosophy. But recently, in the last few 5 years or so, or even say a decade, the Chinese government have realized that by dropping their ancestral spirituality or Confucianism, they have lost a lot. And there is a danger of their people adopting foreign ideology, which might later destroy their solidarity to the state of China. So they brought it back. They brought it back. Every university in the world, every country in the world that China has connection with, they try to build Confucius Institute, which has become a conduit in sharing Chinese culture and Chinese beliefs and Chinese philosophy. They find out that science, just for the sake of science, will not keep China up for long. They needed to keep their people unified, and they believe that their Confucianism have to be taught. Now, many people don't understand that Confucianism involved even ancestor veneration. So here I take from the Encyclopedia of World Religion. Here it says Confucianism is a Western term that has no counterpart in Chinese. In a worldview, it is a worldview, a social, ethic, and political ideology. It's a scholarly tradition, a way of life, sometimes viewed as philosophy, sometimes as a religion. Confucianism may be understood as an encompassing way of thinking and living that entail ancestors' reverence and a profound human-centered religiousness. Now, I'm showing you live here, when Chinese come to Africa, they are building Confucius Institute in our universities. You can see this is Ghana. Now, where is the Akan Institute for the Ujima in universities around the world? Where is it? Where is the Ghanaian or African cultural institution built around universities around the world to explain African philosophy and worldview? Ankh, the black atheists, your fellow Chinese atheists have held on to their tradition. They've gone back to it. The Japanese have always held on to it. But for us, it's like the price for development is that the black man must give up his Africanity in order to be welcomed into development. That's what they told us when Islam came. To be a Muslim, to enter Al-Jannah, you have to give up your name. You have to be called Abdul Malik. That's a beautiful name. Gave up your African name. What is Imhotep? What is Sekou Kelleh? What is Kelleh? No. You have to be called Abdurrahman, Abdurrazak. That's the ticket to heaven. And the Christian came and they said, no. What are you doing? This is devil worship. You have to give. The Christ died for you. You need this. We are the one that must always give up everything we have as a way of salvation to enter into an imaginary development. Now they are inviting us again into neo-Darwinism, that we must give up our culture and that it will go against science. Where is the example of that? I proceed. Shinto, I already talked about it. The Japanese have almost won 29 Nobel Prize. But when you go to Japan, every street has a Shinto temple. It's interesting to know that. I will proceed very quickly. These are not necessary. And okay. Now, the purpose of African spirituality. And what is the purpose? Because this is the whole thing. Let's say, yeah, we accept it. And now we want to incorporate African spirituality. We want to hold on to it in the 21st century. What do we get to benefit? What is there? Science explain whatever I want to know. So we don't need it. So here in this PhD dissertation by Kaikosa Kajangu, he explained it very carefully from the Luba tradition, what they think their spirituality does. He said 3 specific attributes characterize the state of perfection in the Luba wisdom tradition. Lusu, the will, how to train people to use their will above everything, including the self and the world. What is the self and how does self go against the world and how does it harmonize itself with the world? To teach a human being what is your will? What do you use your will for? Because these are things we overlook. What make you procrastinate? What make you not have the will to fight revolution? For example, what make Black people now waking up, have a will to be able to do something for themselves at once? Do they take thousands, hundreds of years, or they take very long time to be able to overcome the European, or waiting for the European to accept them as equal? So there's an issue of will that has not been addressed. The self and the way of being. And all of that, he said, is to create a beautiful earth. This is what it is, a beautiful place that we must live in. Because the earth, some people, for the Muslim and the Christian, we have to escape from earth. We let escape. There's a place we are going, Al-Jannah. We have to escape. For the African, it is part of our being and our reality. We need to fix it. We need to make it good. We need to make it beautiful. And these are things you must learn in your spiritual journey. And Obenga explained it very clearly here. And I'm going to read it from the coffin text, what the purpose of African spirituality, how it's quite different from religious enlightenment. He said here from the coffin text, from page spell 1130, he said, I created the deities from my sweat and humans from the tears of my eye. This is Ra speaking. And Obenga said, in this context, it is not a matter of God creating man in his image, as other religious and philosophical traditions. Humans here are divinities. This is Obenga. Humans here are divinity. Human beings are part God, constantly reenacting the creative process in their own right. Humans are not fallen, degenerate creature obsessed with salvation. Obenga. So when the ancestors, scholars used to tell you, you are gods, you think they are just making a philosophical statement. You are God, means you are an agent that have the ability to create change, the ability to create life, the ability to manifest change and bring about the continuity of life. You have a cosmic responsibility. This is African spirituality. Here, again, we go to Southern Africa. Credo Mutua tells us, my child, God is more in you and more part of you than you are part of yourself. He exists in you more than you exist in yourself. You were not created by God, as the aliens tell you, but you exist as part of God. This here tells you that God is existence itself. I know it's difficult in English language when someone says that. He said, how can God be existence itself? Yes, because you are trying to make God concrete. An old man sitting somewhere, sitting on a chair and speaking Arabic and Hebrew. That's why you have a problem. But God exists as part of you, and God exists as you exist, but you exist as part of God. Your soul is immortal because God is immortal, and your soul is and mine are much part of God as the grain of sandstone is part of the boulder that is part of the mountain. That's a credo mutua. So we know the role African spirituality play in Haitian revolution. I don't need to go over that. And Du Bois speaks here about how African spiritual priests were very important in helping the people when they were on the plantation. There was a name for them. So let me read this quote very quickly by Du Bois. He said in 1915, no, let me start from the red. The red here, I highlighted what he said. He said the Negro priest, therefore, early became an important figure on the plantation, found his function as the interpreter of the supernatural, comforter of the sorrowing, as one who expressed rudely but picturesquely longing, the disappointment and resentment of a stolen people. From such beginning arose the spread with rapidity the Negro Church and its first distinctive Negro American social institution. It was not first by any means a Christian church, but mere adaptation of those rites of fetish, which in American term obey worship or voodooism. So he said two things here. One is that at that very critical point of the life of our ancestors on the plantation, they were dehumanized. Imagine passing around and people actually say that you are not a human being, that you are subhuman. And they really tell you that. And everybody, if you want to do an experiment to see how dangerous that is, let's put 3 people in a room and they wait for the 4th person to come in. And when the person comes in, all of them should tell the person, there's a white substance on your face. Let every 3 people in the room agree that, yeah, we see a white substance on your face. This person will run to the mirror. He won't see any white substance, but you will see him busy washing his face. Because you guys have programmed him to think that there is a white substance on his face. So if the person look right, say, you guys still see something white, they will say, oh my God, we all see something white on your face. That person might spend the whole day washing their face and be miserable, while in reality, there's nothing on their face. What does that tell you is when the ancestors were dehumanized, the idea was to make them to believe they were not human. But these African spiritual priests, according to Du Bois, were the one who maintained their sanity. And they were trying to put it on those people and tell them, look, you are more than what is happening on this plantation. And they engaged them in rituals, positive psychology, to rescue their consciousness. These things that you overlook, they were at the very core of maintaining the existence of our people and keeping them alive as human beings. So your spirituality is very important for even your psychology of looking at reality and viewing things around you. Those ancestors did not have the opportunity on that farm to create any scientific theory to combat the white man. The only thing they had was their subjective consciousness, and that need to be intact for them to see themselves as human beings. And Du Bois mentioned how the early institutions built after slavery were actually the things that emanated from the ancestral tradition that later incorporated into Christianity. Black civilization, I will jump all of these. Here is positive psychology. Psychology today, as we all know it, is treating mental issues. It deals with the negative. What constitutes clinical psychology today is what is wrong with this person. They are suffering from psychosis. They are suffering from this. It tried to understand mental illness and try to how to treat it. But this man, Martin Seligman, had come out with a theory and said, no, we might have been doing it wrong. I think what we should have created was positive psychology, how to even prevent those mental illness from happening. That should have been the approach. And he said that approach involves spirituality as well. He said positive psychology is a science of positive subjective experience. A positive individual trait, positive institution promises to improve the quality of life and prevent pathologies that arise when life is barren and meaningless. Do you know how dangerous it is for life to be meaningless? People commit suicide for that. How dangerous it is to say that you just live for the sake of living. He said the exclusive focus on pathology that had dominated so much on our discipline result in a model of human being lacking the positive features that make life worth living: hope, wisdom, creativity, future-mindedness, courage, spirituality, responsibility, perseverance are ignored in clinical psychology. And today he's one of the most celebrated people. And when we speak of positive psychology in African spirituality, I see people today, because of the attack on African spirituality, some people think pouring libation, they need to ignore it. I said, give thanks. Give thanks to nature. Give thanks to the creator. Give thanks to the ancestors. Pour libation. Be happy. These things do not constitute in any way that you are irrational. No. Gratitude is one of, even being gratitude to your fellow human being is positive psychology. It makes you develop positive attitude. Being grateful. Would you rather be alive or not be alive? If you rather be alive, then that which made life possible have taken a moral decision to make you alive. Be grateful. Would you rather be breathing or not breathing? You rather breathe. To give thanks to the forces that make you breathe. Be thankful. Pour libation for those who come before you and have struggled and laid their life for you to be alive. These were the things. So being praying and doing a libation and ritual, these are things that constitute positive psychology. They do not make you in any way irrational. That's why here when you read, how they call it, Akhenaten in his Hymn of Aten, which is translated here, he said, you are unique when you arise in your form as a living disk, which arises and shine. Which though far away from close, you created millions of forms of yourself. Why alone? Even of those you created, none sees you. You remain still in my heart. Akhenaten was grateful to the physical sun, and he was also grateful to even the force that is behind the sun. That's what Akhenaten was doing. And this is nothing wrong with that. That gratefulness is a very powerful wealth for your mental health. And let not people go around telling you, oh, now, you don't have to be like that. You don't need to do these things in spirituality. They don't matter. They do matter. And they are very important. So I will not talk on my ad. I will jump. Spirituality for people in a hurry. Are you in a hurry? Spirituality is too complex. It doesn't put food on your table. It doesn't pay your rent. It doesn't give you a gun to shoot to be able to defeat your enemy. Okay, pause. You are in a hurry. These are things you can incorporate in your life. When you learn Ma'at, you are talking of purity, bringing purity in your own life. Being honest and truthful at all times is a cosmic demand. It will be useful for you. Yamoja. You don't need to be looking for Yamoja in the sky. It's a principle that may take care. Be careful. Take care of yourself. Be happy. Okay? Ubuntu, community, ancestor solidarity, which we lack today in Black community. Incorporate that in your life. Then you've done African spirituality. Asar, the God self. You don't need to go around worshiping Asar. Because first of all, when you look at the Book of the Dead, the people become Asar. So Asar is to live to protect cosmic order. That's what Asar did. That's why he became the principle of truth and goodness, because he lived to protect cosmic order and truth. He respected nature while he was alive. So become Asar by protecting cosmic order and be on the side of truth. Nyama. Nyama is from the Bambara. It is for you to realize there is good and bad in all things. Be vigilant. I know the Christians have an absolute good God who is loving and everything, and there is no negative from him. Negative comes from Satan. Well, in African spirituality, there's good and bad in everything. So cultivate the good, but there's good and bad in everything. Even the water you drink, when you drink it too much, you'll be in trouble. Azozi from Ghana, community responsibility. These are things you can incorporate in your African culture. You don't have, if you don't want to burn a lot of candles, nobody asking you to burn candles. You can incorporate these aspects in your life, and you can have a very good human relationship and positive psychology in your life. Or show love, altruism, and empathy. Don't you think we need altruism and empathy in our leadership today as African people and Black people? Where is the empathy when African leaders watch their people die because of no medication, but they travel to France and treat themselves? Because their spirituality, their religion tells them that when they go to Mecca and they die, they will go to Al-Jannah. There is no empathy, there's no altruism, there's no law. They are practicing escapism, escape from Earth, either through the book or through astrophysics, escape from Earth. This is the ideology. But we say, show love, Ogun and Ptah. You don't need to worship Ogun or Ptah. But what if worship means being thankful to this principle? Fine. But if you think that they have to now be the one to make your life better without your own active force, then you ignore your divinity. So it is to be Ogun and Ptah is to activate the creative life in you and live to create. Because without creativity, the transformation cannot happen. A human must continue to create. These are things that the African spiritual institution must introduce into you, and they do not constitute backwardness but progress. So here I say Diop called for the return of African spirituality. Reggie said, I misrepresented this source. Here's what Diop said from his article, Alert on the Tropics, 1960. He said, it is reasonable to think that an African federal government, Diop is now thinking that in case we have a federal United States of Africa in the future, he said the federal government will give equal support to the followers of ancestral religion by convoking an ecumenical council and its priesthood to allow the creation of hierarchy, a better adapted liturgy, the training, the education of continental-wide priest caste, the deepening and normalization of ancestral monotheism. By so doing, he gave the reason, the future federal government will protect the continent from further insidious foreign penetration and protect Africans from cultural alienation. For Diop, Islam is there, Christianity is there. We are not going to take a gun and put it on their head and say, put this religion away tomorrow. That's not going to happen. He said, but the approach is give equal support to the African ancestral spirituality. If you give that equal support, it must be organized. It must have priesthood, and they must be trained. And he said, when you do that, you will prevent the continent from being penetrated again from other foreign culture, and African will not be culturally alienated. Your culture is your immune system that have to prevent from other viruses from attacking and destroying you. That's what you must learn. Now, very quickly, I'm at the end. Danger of scientific materialism. Dalai Lama explained here. He said the underlying this view is that the assumption that the final analysis, I go back again. He said underlying this view, it is the assumption that the final analysis matter, it can be described by physics as it is governed by the law of physics, is all there is. Accordingly, this view will uphold that psychology can be reduced to biology, to chemistry, to physics. These ideas do not constitute scientific knowledge. Rather, they represent a philosophical and, in fact, metaphysical position. Dalai Lama, who he has met many scientists in the world, by the way, he's not a scientist, but he is a science enthusiast, being a spiritual priest, but very science enthusiast, and he has met many scientists around the world, all the most prominent scientists you know, when he usually meet them. He said, the assumption that the final analysis of the universe will boil down to matter is merely a philosophical position, because we don't know how this matter, first of all, come into being. So to say that human psychology, our consciousness can all be understood through chemistry and biology and all of that, no, we are only going to have a fraction of understanding, because the consciousness is even subjective. It's not seen. So you cannot be able to determine or understand the totality of it by just looking at how the chemistry reaction is happening in the brain. So we must be careful not to boil everything down to this matter, or seeing that everything can be reduced to matter. When we do that, we are also trying to shut the door on human ability to even reflect and to think deeper in life. It's as good as the religion itself. So scientific materialism is a religion on its own that we must avoid very quickly. So I explained some things in science that we must take note of when science is despiritualized. And I published a letter written by Einstein. It is from the book Spies in the Congo. And this letter here, it explains how Einstein sent a letter to President Roosevelt to go to Congo and get uranium in order to build a nuclear weapon to prevent the Nazis from destroying America and his allies. And eventually, the president does this, and they go to Congo, and we know what happened to Congolese in getting this uranium. But this many years later, in 1945, we will see the Hiroshima and Nagasaki catastrophe that killed millions of people. And even as we speak today, nuclear bomb remain the greatest threat to civilization. Is this science or is barbarism? Yes, we're saying having the knowledge of atom is not a bad thing. But now when it is driven by a political expediency, is driven by capitalism, is driven by power, greed, and control by men, then the science become an instrument of our own destruction. This is what we must avoid by all means. Here, I also mentioned from the BBC article, you will find in 2003, by the way, this BBC article was written 2023, okay, in May. It talks about the US project A119. This project was headed by Dr. Leonard Refugee. He was the head of the project. They wanted to nuke the moon. America literally planned to nuke the moon because they felt that the USSR arrived on the moon before them. Therefore, for them, if they can't get it, they have to destroy it. If they can't get there with the Apollo missions, then they got to send a nuclear bomb to the moon. This is how crazy these people are. That's how insane they are. It is the lack of spirituality that have made them to see the entire universe an object that they can do whatever they want. They do not understand that they are the universe and the universe is them. Who is able to put a nuclear bomb in their own belly? Can you put a nuclear bomb in your belly for the sake of development? No, you can't. But that's what you do when you send it to the moon. But they don't see that. They think you are being too philosophical when you say that. You see? So I mentioned the pseudo progress that they are saying we are making progress. Science has made a lot of progress today, yes. But are you aware that according to the IUCN, an international organization that protects the environment, over 983 reptile species have disappeared because of industrial activities. Amphibians, fishes, birds, mammals. The statistics is here. And it was due to industrial activities funded by these corporations. And for them, the science is just for them to make more money. It is really not about life. Here, the global temperature is rising. I talked about that. Then most importantly, this is dear to my heart because I was in Nigeria and I have a first-hand experience of some of this. This images from the UN Environmental Program. There's a company that you all know called Shell. Shell is a very powerful, one of the $1 billion companies, that have survived, I think, from the colonial period. They have some of their capital from the colonial period. Eventually, the two companies joined together and formed Shell. This company is one of the highest donors to scientific research around the world. But guess what they do? They are extracting oil. These pictures are from Niger Delta, Ogoni land in western Nigeria, southern Nigeria. And these people are destroying the environment of these people. These local people can no longer make farms. They can no longer go get fish in their rivers. They used to plant vegetable crop, have a beautiful life here. They didn't find a careful way to get this oil. There was no careful way to get it. For them, it is destroy the environment as long as you can get the oil for the automobile to run in America and the factories to run and produce your clothes and the car to run. As long as that can happen, we don't care if the environment is destroyed. We don't care if these people here can no longer have food and they can die. All the animals here will die, an environmental catastrophe. Yes, they are sponsors of scientific research. This is not a science that you will wish for. We have to look at science as that it must be redefined in a term that it must be subject to ethics and morality. This is what we are saying. In the GMO, I talk of it, and I will go to my final slide, which caused an uproar after the debate. This is from a National Geographic, and I insist on this article, and everybody can go and read it. A human pig hybrid created in the lab. Now, the image itself I'm showing is an artwork. It's a painting by Patricia Pacini. Patricia Pacini is an activist, and a group of activists learn about this scientific activity going on. And the scientists are determined to create a human hybrid with animals in order to harvest the part. Each time people need donor to be able to give part in hospital. So they will be even commercializing and selling it. So they will develop the human hybrid and then harvest their parts. And they drew this picture and say, imagine we created things like this, and we begin to cut off their limbs, cut off their belly, and take things we want, and then kill them. We have an entire farm of humanoid creatures. How will we feel? In fact, when the scientists were defending this invention, they said, and that will shock you, they said because the Greek created Sphinx to protect the city, the Egyptian created Sphinx to protect Egypt. So these were signs that we were supposed to create creatures like this to protect human life. In this case, we kill them and harvest their part. Very silly defense. And I think that I made it up when I put this image up. No, the image itself is painting, but this type of project is ongoing. In China, it's ongoing in the Western world. Here's what the article says. It's that in a remarkable, if not likely controversial feat, scientists announced today that they have created a first successful human-animal hybrid. The project proves that human cells can be introduced into a non-human organism, survive, and even grow inside a host animal, in this case, pigs. Now, organ growing into the host animal was the beginning, but when you go down the article, they are actually trying to create hybrids. It's ongoing, and there's a lot of protest about it around the world. It's not like it's something new. It's going on. In fact, some say Chinese already have these creatures hiding them. It's not some type of how they would call it conspiracy theory. No, it's ongoing scientific research. So these are things we must watch on. My concern is if we create creatures like these and begin to kill them, it will be very easy to kill a human being. We already kill humans, but now it will be as easy as anything. And that could destroy ethics and morality, and humanity could be leading to catastrophe. With that, I end.
I don't have I need to get a sound effect of like a crowd clapping.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Let me read the last part from this important book. Everybody should get this book from Raseki at Temple. I love this book. It contains a lot of poems and prayers, from various African cultures, and very, very beautiful, from the African American, from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, continental African, a lot of beautiful poems and prayer that are written in there. And I got a quote from there. It said, the purpose of all human life is to achieve a state of consciousness apart from bodily concern. Man is to become godlike through the life of virtue and the cultivation of the spirit through scientific knowledge, practice, and bodily discipline. To free the spirit, control the senses, reward There will be a clear insight. Make your life the subject of intense inquiry. In this way, you will discover its goal, direction, and destiny. Hotep.
Peace, peace. Thank you for that powerful presentation. And so hold on one sec. There we go. I know the chat is lively at the moment. Let me remove that because I'm in this public space here, and it it's raining and stuff. So
and by the way, I still
off
see.
and on here.
Yeah, I still see the screen.
Yeah,
like see myself in the screen. I don't know. Okay, now it's fine.
There you go. All right. I wanted to just mention something here, like, because again, as you stated at the beginning, these conversations are really kind of non-existent. Let me open. There we go. Are really kind of non-existent on the continent. So, like, for example, this individual here, this is Baba, the late Baba, Ifalabi Epega, out of Nigeria. He was a 5th generation Babalawo in Awo in Isheshe, Yoruba Ifa tradition. All right. And this individual is the one who initiated the Babalawo, who began my initiations into Ifa, right? And this brother here is he authored several books, but those in the Ifa tradition may recall this book here, the Sacred Ifa Oracle. And let's put his picture back up. He was a PhD in chemistry and a Babalawo in the Ifa tradition, right? So, like, this idea that they cannot exist one and the same is, it's just outside of the realm of practice, in the continent. And I even wanted to share this, and this is how you would say, how you would pronounce his name, Baba Ifalabi Pega, right? And they have a saying. There's 2 sayings in the Yoruba language, and that is Iwa le Ewa, and actually Iwa and Ewa derive from the same root, and the phrase means character is beauty. And then you have Iwa le Esin, character is your religion. And so it is talking about, again, and this is your human character, how you behave in the world. And I just want to share lastly why this is important. And when people have these discussions, why you have to be grounded in African culture in the first place, right? So this is, I've shared this slide many a times. And can you see it well? I think you should see it. Yeah. So, we all know Baba Amos N. Wilson, right? And he wrote this wonderful text called African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy, right? And in this text, on page 44, he says the following. He says, we're suffering from the absence of an economic system. Money is not a system. Money is what it is. A system involves the systematic and organized utilization of money, a systematized utilization and distribution of money. Without the pattern, without the system, without the organization, one does not have an economy. An economy exists prior to money. There were economies in the world before money was invented. We don't have to have money to have an economized system. So, ultimately, when we study an economic system, we recognize that an economic system at its base refers to the nature of the relationship between people. It's the systematic way people choose to relate one to the other that makes an economic system, not money. When we lack a systematic way of relating to each other, then we can have money and still be poor, have money and be robbed, uh, which is what we are, right? And so this answers the whole economic question, because everybody wants to jump to science for economic reasons, and you can't jump to science, without first grounding and systematizing the way of relating for the people. That's why for the Yoruba, iwale esin, character is your religion, or is the religion. It's the foundation, it's the basis of worship, right? And so he continues on page 45. He says, why do we suffer from this problem then? Why is the Black personality created? I tried to get across the fact that every maladjusted characteristic in the Black personality serves an economic function. Each maladjusted characteristic is not there by accident. It's there simply because Europeans hate us. It's there because it maintains their economic dominance. If I've got money, I can help you. But if I distrust you, I won't help you. And you may not make it. It's not the absence of money, it's the presence of mistrust. In other words, bad character. If I will not cooperate, if you cannot rely on me, when we cannot have an economic system, even though we may have money, let me read that correctly. If I will not cooperate, if you cannot rely on me, then we cannot have an economic system, even though we may have money. In other words, a people must trust, be reliable, be dependable, have respect for each other if they are to develop a viable economic system. When they have those kinds of relationships, they have a social system, and they can build and they can grow economically, right? So with that understanding, this is why the conversation about the religion, because the religion is just the culture of the people, and then in the culture there has to be a set of values, and then culture is your algorithm. It's the processes by which a community solves its problems, and you have to have people of good character to build a system where people trust one another with power, with technology, and the like. And so our religion, our focus, our knowledge was, as what you showed earlier in the conversation. It was to develop good human beings, to develop the best human beings, right? Even the Greeks talked about the superiority of the Egyptian educational system for children because their focus was on making perfect human beings. Because if you don't have perfect human beings, when you get a little bit of knowledge, the first thing that you think about is weapons and how to destroy people and environments. And you don't care. It's let's try to reduce costs at all costs, even if it costs, lives, right? And so this is why it's really kind of a silly conversation to talk about African. Like, what are you going to thrive off of? You're not going to thrive, without a viable culture. That's the religion. It's the culture of the people, And so I just wanted to add that, to the great slides and things that you already have provided for us today. And let me see here.
Great point, bro. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna take two questions. from the chat, and we'll have to get out of here soon. So I know there's going to be a time delay. So while y'all gather your questions, I'm just going to play another quick commercial.
Yeah. Tokyo wanna those that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for car Uno. Came to kick the door with the game in judo. Pin game low. That's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595 check it for pen flight. Hit the turnpike slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready. By enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary. Hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
That is right. You can get the text Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt Volume 1 towards an etymology of the place name Kemet. It is currently getting pseudos in their fillings at the moment, and I'm very happy and proud of that. So you can help get others in their fillings too by supporting the work. And you can get it at asarimhotep.com. And let me check the let's see here. Let me see. Yep, and Brother Zoo. So Corey asked, "What's wrong with African American culture at Sekou?" If he even made that claim. You're on mute.
What is wrong with African American culture at Sekou? Well, first of all, I didn't talk about that. I didn't say something wrong specifically with African American culture. But if you are asking in terms of what do you see as in terms of its connection with the continental Africa, and then in terms of existing in America, how does Black American exist as a culture or as a social location? Which one is it? I will make a few comments. First of all, the ancestor scholars, all of them, their struggle has been for African American to see themselves as a culture that is also part of the larger culture, which is in Africa, the ancestral home. That's what they've been on. See themselves as a culture and also part of the larger culture, which is the continent. Just as all the diaspora Africans, not exclusive to African Americans. Same for Asians, same for Jamaicans and all of that. Now, what does the Diop tell us about 3 factors of identity in terms of cultural identity? One is the language, linguistic factor. When you want to constitute a culture, language becomes crucial because it is the language that becomes the vehicle of your culture. So what has happened to the diaspora African is that through this 400-year tragedy, the language was struck out, that part. But 2 aspects still left: the historical factor and the psychological factor. These factors are still intact, and these are very, very yeah. You are on mute, Asa.
Oh, my bad. I had accidentally kicked you out because I saw 2 versions, so I thought you were still sharing your screen on the other one. And so when I tried to kick that one off, it kicked both of them off. So That's my bad. I'm sorry. Continue.
Yes. So I said the psychological factor and the historical factor of the African American and other diaspora Africans is still intact. In fact, that's why Pan-Africanism was born. That's why you see people like Malcolm X establishing his organizations, coming back to Africa. That's what you saw during the first All-African Conference by Kwame Nkrumah. You saw some delegates coming from America, Black America, and they came and they participated. Now, this historical and psychological factor can always recreate the language. That's the good part. When you have the psychological factor and the historical factor, you are always still within your cultural context. What happened is, what some people are trying to do is to ignore the historical and the psychological factor of this identity and say, we are part of something called American culture. Okay, I don't want to discredit anybody from being part of anything. You can be citizens. You can come to Canada here today, like my son was born here. They call him, he's a Canadian. And then now you'll say that he's a Canadian culture. But I will have to tell him, you're an African. You come from an African culture. Yeah, you have Canadian citizenship. When you're an African, you have an African culture. And this is our perception of reality. This is our culture. And even if it's able for him to learn the language, he learned it. The reason is, at the end of the day, we need to fight as a force. We need to defend ourselves, survival as a force, survival as a people. Economic, politics, education, progress, everything is involved. We cannot do that if we are disoriented, if we are not operating from the same page. It doesn't matter if we are all scientists. That's what Ang is not getting. Even if all of us here become nuclear scientists, we can save a village if we are not operating on the same platform and ideology. We cannot save a village. All of us, all Black people, we can become scientific and literate for all I care. But if we don't have a culture that binds us together, that make us to have sentiment to protect our identity and our values, there's nothing productive we can really do. The difference between Diop said, difference between a population and a people is that a population you can find it in a market. You have a group of people there, some are buying clothes, some are buying shoes. They have nothing to do with each other. They're just there for economic interest. But a people have values and culture. They are not just there to buy shoes. It's about looking after each other. So that culture, I believe, is what the scholars of African American community are trying to explain to the people, that we must bind together as a culture, as a people. That will be halfway of even defeating our enemy. Just that alone, that we stand as a culture, we have already defeated the other culture halfway through.
All right. And here is the last question of the night. It's coming from AC1. He says, I do admit spirituality needs to be reviewed, as certain beliefs in my village hometown can now be described from a scientific point of view now. Essentially asking, do we need to go back and revisit certain scientific concepts, in indigenous religious concepts to see if they coincide with scientific understandings and realities, and I will add, if so, then how do we go about doing that?
Yes, well, that's an interesting question. That's why I mentioned the reconstructionist, the creative reconstructionist that Kajangu talked about in his PhD. People like Brother Asarimhotep, those who have come from the Diopian school. You are talking about Molefikete Asante and all these people. What they are doing is to collect the totality of African wisdom. That's what it's called Renaissance. Is the rediscovery and expression of your creativity. So you rediscover, you go backward. The European call it Renaissance when they did it. They went back first to Greek and Rome. Then out of it, they saw philosophy. Out of it, they saw science. Out of it, they saw a lot of things. Then build on it. All of the scientific concepts you have today, you can trace all of them back to Greece and Rome in their elementary or fundamental form. So what we need to do is to make a strategic return into our civilization. This includes the written and non-written. The written being Kemet and Kush. In fact, some Kushite writing have not been deciphered. In fact, I think people like, let me give an assignment to Ankh. He should help us to start deciphering the Kushite writing, because he's the scientist among us. Instead of be fighting on YouTube, he should be helping us deciphering the writing in Kush, so we know what the Kushite said. So that was just a that was just by the way. So we need to go back, a strategic return, and look at the totality of our African wisdom. Not look at it, oh, it's a religion and I believe. So you make a conclusion already. Now you are not able to do any research anymore. You have to do blanking of your thinking and remove yourself from the Eurocentric perspective and calm down and collect these wisdoms, both written and non-written, the oral one, put them together and see, oh, this sounds scientific. Then you apply it and see if it is. And this is metaphysics. And you see how it works. Oh, this is philosophy. You can do that successfully. And I think if Ankh takes his time and read, I think he will get a Nobel Prize by just studying African culture properly than being a science enthusiast, passing around talking about Darwinism. You take your time. We are not saying, and don't make a mistake, some people make and say, everything the ancestors said is 100% approved. I'm not going to, if you do that again, then you are actually affecting your own creativity. When you make the strategic return, the purpose is for you to separate the chaff from the grain and even improve if possible. Build on it, improve it to meet the demand of today. So when I hear people say, why do you criticize Diop? Why do you criticize Obenga? Then I'm saying you don't want us to improve. If to improve, we have to look at what Diop and Obenga said and see if it's rhyme with our modern understanding or discovery. And we try to push it to the limit. And where we build upon it, we build upon it. And by building upon it, that's what they wanted us to do. If they build a house of mud, they want us to build a house of stone. But we always remember that foundation they laid and understand why they even built it in the first place. It was inspire us to build a very powerful stone house. So I think that's the method we need to do. Go back to the tradition, learn it. I'm not saying go back and remain there. I'm saying go back and get it, Sankofa, and bring it into modernity and see, look at it very critically from an African center perspective and see in which area it can improve our life. I tell somebody, if you get nothing at all, like I mentioned, spirituality for people in a hurry. Let's say you say, well, me, I don't want to do the ceremonies and all of that. That's fine. But can you bring Ma'at into your life? Can you live a life of truth, of morality, of honesty? Can you cultivate that in your life? You are within African spirituality. You don't need to be extraordinarily you're a priest. And people forget this. That's where I always tell people, I grew up in the village. I was not a city boy in Africa. I grew up, despite I've been Muslim and Walabi, but in the village, you still have substantial number of people staying with African spirituality. Like, for example, when I was in Gambia during businesses, there's a particular tribe in Gambia that they are not Mandinga. I will try to remember their name. They are both in Guinea-Bissau and they are also in Gambia. Majority of them are Christian, but a good number of them stick to African spirituality. When you go to their villages, you see them with their altars and everything. Very honest people. But there's one thing you observe about them. Not every random people on the street is a spiritual guru that can tell you anything about the spiritual culture. There are just few specific people who are teachers who really know the in-depth message. The regular people are just living their life. They do the farming, they take care of the animals, they do regular things. They only know the basic thing that will keep them, their ethics, basic thing that will make them to treat other people good. The rest of it, they are doing practical things. They are building houses. They are looking at farms. They are looking at their animals. So it's not like there is a 5 o'clock, everybody wear the imam and they go to everybody is not kind of a Islamic or a Christian that go to church every Sunday. You won't find it. They don't even have a shrine where everybody must come to that shrine on a particular day. It doesn't exist. Every family just have their own little shrine, but there is a general understanding of agreement on certain moral ethics and principles, and they respect nature, and that's it. So don't think you have to be extraordinarily spiritual to practice African culture.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I do appreciate, you spending this time. We're going on 3 hours of good and solid information. And for those who want to, converse with you some more about this or some other topics that, they may be familiar that you've had on other platforms, what's the best way that they can reach you?
The platform I use for now is still Sarnetta University. Is where I still do my presentation. I am planning to develop my own YouTube to make it popular so that I can do most of it. For now, I'm still on Sarnetta University. My Facebook is Kelleh Sarah, where I write posts time to time.
Indeed, indeed. And thank each and every one of you who are listening live on all 3 of the platforms. That is YouTube, on X, as well as Facebook. And for those who are engaging vigorously in the chat with the various different conversations. And thank you all for the questions that you have given to our special guest here today. African spirituality versus science, if that is even a well-formed concept. And I appreciate our guest for sharing his knowledge. And, big things of one for the near future for the Mbongi. So stay tuned. If you have not, please consider joining the channel. So hit the subscribe button. So every time we have these conversations, these live conversations, or if I upload something, then you can come to the or you can get the notice that a show is coming up, and you can mark your calendars. And so with that said, I appreciate each and every one of you, and until next time, peace.